want to improve the performance of the housing asset, both for the benefit of households and the nation as a whole, we need to think about interventions that touch each of the 6 asset dimensions. Before we get there, however, it's useful to think about 5 broad factors that impact on the performance of the housing asset in each of those dimensions. These are rights, location, access to finance, tradability, and time. The first influence on housing asset performance is the system of property rights that exists. The household's formal property rights over the property, even if the house structure itself is informal, impacts substantially on the value and therefore the performance of housing as a private asset. 2 kinds of property rights matter. These are the rights to land ownership and/or control, whether leasehold, freehold, or sectional title, and these rights are expressed in the title deed or lease agreement, and the development rights, which are governed by municipal regulations. Ownership rights matter for the state. Where there is legitimate title, the state can extract taxes and development charges. Where the state fails to grant rights effectively, the informal market steps in. Development rights are important levers that the state can apply to shape the progress of investment by prioritizing certain kinds of development over others. For example, the state can promote affordable housing by granting density bonuses or removing parking requirements when housing developments are targeted at a particular income range. The second influence on housing value is location. Land is a finite resource. It is not renewable, and so there is competition for the type and the location of land on which housing is developed. People are generally willing to pay more for locations that are close to amenities or to natural resources, or for places that have low crime rates or good services. This applies to informal housing too. In many cities, you can see that informal settlements develop in places with physical access to particular amenities like a road or a place of employment. The closer to the amenity, the higher the access price. Government can influence how location affects the housing market through good urban governance. When areas are better managed with good policing or with investments in roads, recreation spaces, and infrastructure, the value of the area improves, benefiting the households who own property there. Private investors also influence land value through the investments that they make in their property and the improvements this creates. There is a negative side to this as well. Sometimes public or private landholders speculate that value will go up, so they hold on to land they own and they do nothing, waiting for the value to increase. This undermines the land market and it impacts on how land performs as an asset. The third influence on housing market performance is financing. During the course, we will consider how finance is important in all stages of housing delivery. For now, it's important to note that having access to housing loans increases individuals' choices because when they make housing decisions, because it improves their affordability by allowing them to pay for their housing in installments over time. When houses are sold formally and with mortgage finance, they achieve better prices and are more affordable, and owners may invest more as they see their property value grow. This graph shows the prices of government-subsidized houses in South Africa that were sold by their homeowners through the formal system. When we analyze the sales price for properties sold with no mortgage finance versus those sold with mortgage finance, we find that those with no finance sold for much lower prices. This means that the seller realized a lower price. Their financial asset value was depressed. It also suggests that the buyer had to come up with cash for the purchase, which suggests that they were likely to be somewhat wealthier. Lower income buyers couldn't afford such a cash purchase. Housing finance comes in different shapes and sizes. Beyond mortgage finance, which is what we call secured credit, attached to a property through the title deed, there are unsecured housing microfinance loans and pension-backed loans. These different instruments respond to the different circumstances that households might find themselves in. The fourth influence on housing value is its tradability. The monetary value of the housing asset can only be realized if the house can be traded or rented. That is when value translates into money. An important indicator of the tradability of housing is the ease of transaction, the steps, time, and costs involved in selling, buying, or renting residential property. Government plays an important role in this, making it more or less complicated, being efficient or inefficient, and setting fees. When it feels particularly hard or expensive to transact formally, people can be compelled to transact informally, and this creates terrible problems down the line because with informal transactions, security of tenure is undermined. Asset performance is not only relevant to formal housing. In a survey of residents living in different informal settlements in South Africa, residents commented on what they thought the value of their informal shack was. These properties could not be traded in the formal market. They were traded informally without any legal transfer of title, and yet estimates of value ranged from $1 all the way through to $10,000, and the monthly rental paid for this accommodation ranged from free to about $110 a month. This meant that rental yields varied from 4% up to 320%. For comparison, we hope 7% returns are what we get from good investments. The fifth influence on housing value is time. All of these factors of asset performance change over time, sometimes in different directions. For example, what might be a terrible location when the housing is built could be understood as an excellent location 20 years later, after the rest of the city fills in and delivers amenities and other points of value that make the place desirable. Or the flip side could be true. A great location, for example on the coast, could become terrible with the effects of climate change. Or further, local interest rates, a recession, or even global economic events could put pressure on affordability and thereby reduce demand for housing, which could make house prices depreciate. It takes time to realize housing value. This means that we need to track housing value and movements in house prices on an ongoing basis all the time. Property market analysts look at these 5 indicators and at others to track the performance of property markets over time. To assist policymakers, regulators, and other housing practitioners in South Africa, CAF has built a series of property market dashboards that track key metrics at the very local neighborhood level in the major cities. Lightstone Property, a company based in South Africa, tracks fluctuations in different value bands in a market. The graph here shows that low-value properties, shown here in yellow, experience erratic changes in value, while the higher value properties are more stable. This is influenced by many factors, and these factors are tracked in a house price index. House price indices are not yet very common, but they are increasingly becoming a requirement for financial regulatory systems. Several countries, including Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, have been developing house price indices. So, to recap, 5 factors: rights, location, access to finance, tradability, and time influence market performance. It is possible to track the performance of different housing markets and of housing markets across countries, and it is equally relevant to track the housing market performance in informal settlements, as it is in higher income neighborhoods. The performance factors generate different housing options. We will examine later in this course how targeted and affordable housing finance expands people's choice of housing options and improves the overall performance of the housing asset for the household themselves and the housing sector for the country as a whole.